Boris Effects has several options when it comes to working with audio inside of your effects workflow. First off, we have Beat Reactor, which is integrated in 40 plus BCC Plus as well as BCC effects to drive parameters to move to music or the audio source of your choice. The other newly added addition is Audio Visualizer. In the case of Visualizer, this allows us we sample a sound source, and from that, you can design and create either audio waveforms or frequencies that are warped, stylized, as well as placed wherever you want inside of your project. Let's see these two tools in action. We're going to first of all start with Beat Reactor. To follow along, just open up the Video 9 exercises bin and double-click the Beat Reactor project that's inside of it. First of all, let's just give a playback of this clip so we can listen to the audio ahead of time. I'll go to the beginning of the project and press Ctrl-tilde to do a full screen playback. Now that we're familiar with it, what we'd like to do is have the audio drive a bit of a flicker here within the windows. Now to accomplish this, let's go to our Effects tab, and I'd like you to do a search for Fast Film, which you'll find in the Film Style category, the Fast Film Glow. We'll now simply apply it to the clip. We press Shift 5. Let's play around with a few of the glow properties. First of all, I'll bring up the threshold a bit so it has less of an impact there on the windows. Let's bring down the glow intensity slightly as well to a value of 50, and also give it a different glow color. I'll go towards orange in this case, and let's press OK. Fast Film Glow is among several other BCC effects that have Beat Reactor attached to it. In Continuum 2023.5, we also added Beat Reactor to several BCC Plus effects, including Film Glow as well as Video Glitch. And the minute that we click on Enable Beat Reactor, because we're in Premiere Pro, what we need to do is actually access an external file. So we can't point it to the audio that's on our A1 track right now, but this is something that you can do inside of After Effects, which I'll show you here in a second. Now this is selected. Once you click the disclosure triangle next to Beat Reactor, click the load button under external file, and let's find a AIF file that we can use under the exercise files. Go to load external file, and in those Continuum files, let's find the Beat Reactor exterior 2.aif file buried within an audio folder. Let's choose open, and immediately we see an overlay of frequencies on our image represented to us in a spectrum. If we want to change the way that the spectrum looks, we can twirl down the audio spectrum options, and instead of seeing only 32 frequencies, increase that amount to something much greater, like in this instance 512. I will bring this back down to about 128 in this case, and if I press the spacebar to play back, we can clearly see the various frequencies in the music track. Now what I'd like to do is focus on the frequencies here in the orange part of the spectrum. But before I can make that selection, which will be represented in the output here on the right, I have to choose a property that I'd like to have affected by the music, or a parameter. So under Apply Parameter A options, let's choose Glow Intensity as what's going to be affected. And all of a sudden you should see the outline of a box here on the left, highlighting several frequencies here. Now let's get control of this by selecting Fast Film Glow by its name at the top of the effect controls, and then using these crosshairs to signal in on the frequencies there around the orange fields. In fact, I'm going to get 4 of these here. I'm going to select those, and you should see here on the right-hand side, we now have a gray line representing our output. So to see what that selection translates to over here at the right, let's just play that back. And I can see that certain frequencies are getting cut off here by my selection. So I'm going to drag the sample corner 1 even up further, and just notice how that actually lowers down the overall output. So I'll just drag that up and now just play back again. Excellent. So now that I have the frequencies that I want in Beat Reactor, just above our Apply Parameter A options, there's a Show Graph option, which we can now just turn off by setting no, allowing us to focus on the glow itself. And to do this, let's go into the audio apply options, where first of all, in this specific setup, what Beat Reactor is doing is adding to the intensity value that we've selected. So we set the intensity to a glow intensity of 51, and based on the frequencies that we've selected, it's going to add to that value, creating a wiggle-based effect. So I'll play that back. Now, if we desired more of an impact, we could go back to the original graph and select more frequencies so that it happens more often. Alternatively, we could also play around a bit with the output minimum and output maximum. So what values are currently being affected, along with the strength. All of these will have an effect in the way that the parameter is adjusted. Another thing to keep in mind is that there's currently a fall off with the selected frequencies. When Beat Reactor meets a certain value, we see this blink wiggle, and then it goes down from that value to its original. We can control how that goes down by playing around with the fall off. Rather than use unused intermediate, let's choose a preset like quadratic soft, which is going to ease back down to the original value. How long it takes to ease back down is controlled by the fall off time that you see here. It's currently set to 0.5. Let's set that to lower 0.3 so it doesn't take so long to fall off. And here, just by those small adjustments, we've been able to change the impact of Beat Reactor. Okay, before we see another example of Beat Reactor, let's take a look at Audio Visualizer. The main difference with Audio Visualizer as compared to Beat Reactor is that the frequencies or waveforms that you produce are your output, that you want separately, or in this case, mixed together with footage. Now to see this all in action, just open up the Audio Visualizer sequence, and let's press Shift-7 to go to our Effects tab, where I've already done a search for BCC plus Audio Visualizer, and you're going to find this in the BCC Time category once you have Continuum 2024 installed. Once you drag it onto a clip, we're going to see a similar message to what we saw with Beat Reactor, which is that we need to link an external file to this. Unless you are inside of After Effects, which can see audio files natively in your composition. So what I'll do is head to my effect controls, click on the Select Audio checkbox, and under the footage folder that comes with the exercise files to this course, let's select the Eugene short.wav file. Now it's good to mention that in addition to WAV as well as AIF files, we now support MP3 files for both Beat Reactor and Audio Visualizer. Let's choose Open, and now we can see similar frequencies that we saw with Beat Reactor. Just to see that everything is synced together, I'll just do a full screen playback. And it's definitely responding to that external audio. Now, in order to make some changes to our visualizer, if we're just starting out, first of all, we can go to the generator section, where we actually have the choice between two audio styles. So right now, frequencies, which we're familiar with Beat Reactor, and waveform. In addition to this, we can select how the waveform is made up. In this case, it's made of dots, but we can have that be bars or a single dot. And then we can even choose a dot style. So right now, rectangles are being displayed, but we could have circles or even half circles into the mix. The dot style will not become available if you have bars selected, but then in addition, we also have a resolution that you can choose from. So the generator section is going to be the best to give you your base look. If you're looking to see what's possible with Visualizer, look no further than the effects editor. So let's click on the effects editor badge, and on the left are all of the presets that ship with Visualizer to give you a starting point. And many of these are warped, and color correction and glows were added to them. So in this case, if we check the waveform dots mirrored look, we can give that a playback. And while we're not hearing audio, we do get a sense for how this visualizer will respond. And in this case, we can even take a snapshot of that visualizer, select another visualizer, and then by clicking on the monitor, do a side-by-side comparison in one of two ways, but either vertically or horizontally, alternatively just seeing these top and bottom or left and right. I'll get out of that comparison mode, and let's settle on selecting the waveform single dot. Now, rather than go through all of the properties that are possible with Audio Visualizer, I did want to give you a breakdown in how this one was created. So first of all, if we look at our generator, we can see that the audio style was set to a waveform and dots. Mirror it on a given axis, and that's currently disabled. But what really took place here is something called polar warp. So before this warping, this is how the visualizer looked. And this is a mix between the generated style, not to mention some of the taper controls that were turned on for this visualizer. Once this base look was set up, it was then colorized with the gradient, and then polar warp was turned on to place this on a circle. And one really cool thing about polar warp is that we can have this repeat. So by reflecting it on both the X and the Y axis, you'll see that we get multiple copies of this visualizer. After this visualizer was distorted with polar warp, I'll just close up those properties. A couple final effects were added for stylization, and that includes the film glow, which I'll currently just disable so you can see the glow added to our gradient color. And I'm also going to twirl down the background section. This would allow you to not only add a solid or gradient, but mix this back in to the source footage to which we applied it to. And once you click on apply at the bottom of the interface, all of this is going to carry on over into Premiere Pro. Now, there are a couple different ways that we could also integrate the visualizer further into our scene, and one is in the global transform section. If I click this on, this is going to allow us to move our visualizer, and you can see where it is in the sections of effects. So this is ideal for moving around your visualizer once you've applied things like mirror and polar warp to it, versus some pre-transform properties that we have and can be applied before that in the pipeline. Now, this contains two controls, both tumble and spin, which will allow us to integrate it into 3D space. Not to mention, if we go to the BCC Visualizer at the top of the effect, you'll see these corners. We can actually integrate our visualizer using corner pins and placing that into the scene as well. Now, in addition to this, there is a section at the top of the effect for both mocha masking and tracking. So we can use mocha masking to put the visualizer behind the subject, not to mention use mocha parameter tracking, which would link down to the corner pin section of the global transform setting. On top of all this, this BCC effect also has pixel chooser, which we can choose to enable, and it will allow us to use one of these three sections down here to mask or matte our visualizer. One of the most simplest forms is to go to the mask section and turn on circle. And you may have noticed that when I did enable this, now currently there's an invisible circle in our scene, which you can view by turning on the view mask matte option, and anything outside of this circle is not seen. We can, of course, increase the size of the circle or decrease it. And in this case, what I want is the visualizer to actually be on the outside, not be where my subject is, just so that she still remains the center of focus. And just with this simple masking technique, let me just play this back. Based on the luminance information of this shot, instead of using a mask shape, which I will set to off in this instance, and twirl up those properties, with pixel chooser still enabled, I can go down to matte and choose a channel instead. In fact, I'm going to choose Luma. We can see that everything sort of disappeared except for a little bit of the visualizer in the brightest areas of the shot. What I'm going to do is actually just make sure that it's set to video 1 and set this to threshold, where we can use an amount to define where we'd want our visualizer to show up using luminance values in our shot. It's right now just showing in the brightest areas of this clip based on a low threshold. And the cool part is if we go to the bottom of the effect, we can invert this mask, play with the threshold further, or try a different matte type. In this case, matte levels might be a bit better, allowing us to adjust a black level on our clip. And if we use that, in addition to our circle, we can combine those two sections together. Excellent. Now that we've gotten a sense for working with Pixel Chooser and Audio Visualizer, as well as Beat Reactor and Premiere Pro, let's go to After Effects and see one more Beat Reactor example. I'm here inside of After Effects, and what you're going to want to do is double-click the PI and Beat Reactor.aep file in order to follow along. The composition I have opened up is the PI Beat Reactor Start, which you can just double click here inside the project panel. There happens to be a empty solid called PI, and what you don't have, which is a wave file of a heartbeat. I don't have permission to distribute this file, so you need to go to freesound.org, just do a search for heartbeat, and if you sign up with your email, you're able to download that. To take a clearer look at the audio here in After Effects, we can press LL, which will reveal the waveforms. I'll just press the spacebar so we can play back. Now, what I'd like to do is connect this heartbeat to two different parameters under particle illusion. In my effects and presets, I've already done a search for particle illusion, and I'll apply that to the solid. And here in Effect Controls, let us click the Launch Particle Illusion button. With the presets here on the left, I'm looking for a HUD-based preset. So in fact, I'll do a search amongst the libraries for HUD. I find this complex 3D hug exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm going to double click it, which brings it to the stage where I can make some further refinements. I can see that part of this heads-up display is getting cut off, so I'm going to select the layer 1 here and just change the position of all of these layers back in Z-space. So I'll settle on a value of about 348. Now that that's all set up, let's apply this. We can see it now back in our After Effects composition. And what we'd like to do is add some glow to our particles. So we can twirl down the glow properties just a little bit down here. Turn the glow on. Let's increase the glow intensity to a value of 100 and affect more pixels by bringing down the glow threshold. I'll set it to a value of 3. Now that that's set up, let's go and enable Beat Reactor under Particle Illusion. And notice that in the Beat Reactor settings, we have two choices because we're inside of After Effects, not available to us in Premiere. And that is that we can reference the host sound layer. So the minute that you bring in your heartbeat or your audio source, we can sample that. So I'll actually use the Command key just to play back. We can see the various hits here. So I'll target these two taller ones right here. First of all, under Apply Parameter A, I'm going to choose the parameter that I'd like to affect, which happens to be the glow intensity. And just to note, one of the new features of Continuum 2024 is that Particle Illusion has actually expanded the list of different properties that now you can have affected by Beat Reactor. So you might see an increased list depending on the version of Continuum that you're using. We now get our lovely box. And I'll place it now with the crosshairs there around the two frequencies that I'd like to target. Okay, let me bring this up a bit, just paying attention to the levels output there on the right-hand side. And let me just go back to the beginning of the project. And while not playing back in real time, we should see that the glow is definitely being changed. Now this might be too bright for your taste when it reaches full impact. So we can make a couple changes. So if you use your Command left and right arrow keys or Control left and right arrow keys on a PC, we can adjust the intensity of the glow by opening up the audio apply options. I want to change the output max value to something a little bit lower. Let's go to 50%. So only reach 50% of the height of the glow. And you can see that the intensity of it has been brought down quite a bit. Could also bring down the apply strength amount, but I'll just leave it as is for now. And let's go to fall off right now and just set this to a quadratic soft to a little bit of a greater value of 0.6. And I'll just use that Command key to sort of scrub through that impact so we can see the effect that's having there on the glow. While we're at it, in several different parameters that we can affect, in the instance of both the fast film glow and particle illusion, we have multiple parameters that we can affect. So we don't have to leave it just to one. In fact, if I go to apply parameter B, this time I'm going to affect the opacity of all of the particles. I'll open the apply options B. And instead of having our parameter being added to the value, I'll actually set this to subtract. So the opacity will go down from its current value of 100%. Going through here, I'll target some different frequencies with this new box that's on screen. The orange ones are looking good. So I'll grab on the crosshairs of those orange ones, selecting the frequencies that I like. I'll also increase the height of that. And you should see that right now, even just with this setting, it is bringing down the overall opacity of the heads-up display. And the levels output of the second selection is being represented here on the right because we activated it. Just notice that if I bring down that crosshair, bring it closer to the maximum height, entire HUD disappears because of how strong it is. So it's reaching its max output. But if I increase that just a bit here with my levels selection, we can see that it doesn't go all the way down to 0. Other things that we can do, of course, is just change the output max. If we don't want the opacity to be as aggressive, we can set it to say, hey, you know what? At your output max, don't go lower than 40%. That's there. I'll bring the output max down to 20 in this case. On the apply options B, let's turn off our show graph, and I'll just render out this final example so we can see it. As you can see, using Beat Reactor to drive specific parameters can be extremely helpful in your effect workflow, whether it be in Premiere Pro or Adobe After Effects. As a final word, there happens to be a standalone Beat Reactor effect that you can use to output sound values and then use expressions or linking in order to connect that to any parameter that you want.